Hello, I'm V.B. Price. I'm the editor of NewMexicoMercury.com. I'm here today on Insight New Mexico in the Mercury Library with Virginia Necochea, who is one of the organizers of Contra Santolina, a community group opposed to the Santolina Master Plan. She's a contributor to the Mercury and has written a really insightful, punchy, hard-hitting editorial about Santolina, which I have to admit I've also written about it as well, full disclosure, and I'm completely opposed to it, but I'm going to try to be objective if that's possible. She is pursuing a PhD at UNM in the Department of Education in language literacy and social cultural studies. It's wonderful to have her here with us, and we look forward to a great conversation.
So thank you for having me here today.
So the idea that a master planned community, yet another one, in a city that has had many failed ones, they can't even fill up the ones we've got, that's going to have 90,000 new people and 75,000 new jobs. It's as if it's a kind of a magic act. And I've written about that myself, but I'm wondering if you might comment a little bit about those jobs. What kind of jobs do you think they might be? And also, if you could sort of give a kind of a general overlook at that plan.
So like you said, yes, the Santolina Master Plan does encompass quite a few acres. I mean, we're not talking even of a few. We're looking at close to 14,000 acres of land, wow. Right? And the projection is to, at some point have a population of over 95,000 residents, 95. Which we've been comparing to the population of Rio Rancho, because that's, it's important to give people examples so that they understand the size of this development that we're, talking about. And they're also including in the master plan a projection of over 70,000 jobs. I think it was 75,000 jobs. And so, one of the things that's come up in the hearings is, well, what jobs will those be? Where do you get those numbers and what types of jobs will they be? And recently in another interview that we had In Focus, specifically Jim Strozier from Consensus Planning mentioned that the jobs would be primarily construction. And for us, we think about, well, construction jobs, it only targets a specific population of people, and they're temporary. And so we question that. How are those jobs going to positively impact the state of, economic condition right now in our city and our county when you're talking specifically about construction jobs, which, again, they're temporary, they're not long lasting. Right. So, we have brought that up, but that's the new 4-letter word, right, that is being thrown out. They're jobs. And so for us, that's one of the things that we've noticed, that's how people have been convinced with the Santolina Master Plan, and their support for it is based on that word jobs.
So could you tell us a little bit about what the process has been in terms of the Planning Commission and the County Commission now? And then I'd like to talk a little bit more about the nature of the plan and the timing of the plan.
Well, we have been participating in the hearing process for over a year. And actually, this July, it will actually be 2 years that the Santolina Master Plan has been in this process. And so we actually, although it's been a long process and arduous, it's also good for us because there's a delay on the plan itself, right, on being approved. And so at every hearing that has been held, there has been an increased number of people that have shown up to speak in opposition of the master plan. And this last hearing that we had back in December, on December 3rd exactly, I think there were 5-6 hours minimum of public testimony against the Santolina Master Plan. And what's important to note for the people who have not been able to attend these hearings is that it's not just, usually the angry community members how we're categorized as angry and aggressive. We had the star lineup of people who were speaking against the master plan. And we had ally legislators, we had ally decision makers, we had researchers, we have, lawyers, we have, students that are coming out, nonprofit organizations, neighborhood associations. So you're seeing the community mobilize and unite to speak their opposition against the Santolina Master Plan. But to me, it's largely felt disenfranchised, right? I feel really disenfranchised and disempowered because despite the opposition that has been present, right, and it's been loud and clear, it still has made its way through the Bernalillo County Planning Commission. And so on December 3rd, 4 of the members of the CPC voted to approve the Santolina Master Plan, which means they recommended it for approval. And so it went to the next phase, which is being heard by the Bernalillo County Commissioners. That will be on March 26th at 1:30 One Civic Plaza.
So for those of us who don't speak Spanish very well, what does Santolina mean? And can you tie it in to the Atrisco grant, to all this shark eat shark, the word comes out now, with the ownership being in the hands of Barclays Bank?
So Santolina is it's actually a plant. And what's interesting is that it's not a native plant to our continent. And it's primarily used for ground cover. And so to me, it's saddening that a poor little plantita has received such negative press, right? But it's not the plant that we're talking about. It's a name that they chose. But very interesting, again, is that it's not a native plant, right? Which is very important to highlight because many people, I think they don't realize who owns this land, right? Yeah. And the owners on paper, right, it's Barclays Bank. So British multinational bank, Barclays is the owner of this significant chunk of land, which we have to remind ourselves that was the Atrisco land grant. And so it brings us to this really sad history, right? And we have to remember that and recognize it. And the other important thing that we've been trying to raise awareness regarding is that this is nothing new. Santolina is not a new development. It has a new name, but Santolina is the original Sunkel, right? And if you know some of the history of that, which again, it would take a whole other segment to talk about that history of the Atrisco land grant, but back in 2006, Westland Development Corporation, they sold that piece of land to Sunkel, which is a California-based company. And then in 2008 and 2009, there were TIDs that were presented during the legislative session to basically fund, right, the upfront costs that were needed to build Sunkel, but they did not go through. They did not make it through the legislative session. And so in 2010, then Sunkel defaults on their loans, and it's now sold. That land is sold at auction, and the company that bought it was their Westland Albuquerque land holding, which is the agent for Barclays Bank. And so originally, Sunkel was purchased at $250 million, I believe, and in 2010, the selling price for that same piece of land dropped to $148 million. And so it's important for people to recognize that we're being sold this idea of this new development, this shiny city on the hill, but it's actually the old Sunkel.
So can you give us a rough idea of what the master plan is like? What it includes, what the restrictions are, the specs are?
So it's over 13,000 acres. and that's being proposed for the Southwest Mesa. It would also include, apart from over 37,000 homes, it would include commercial buildings, industrial park. And so we are talking about a brand new city, right, being built in this specific area. And so it wouldn't be an immediate, they wouldn't build this immediately. It actually does take quite some time, similar to Mesa del Sol, right, which we also know is another development that was proposed, and that currently it's basically stopped, right? It has not panned out the way, again, the promises that were made for Mesa del Sol, which again, it promised over, I think, 60,000 jobs, and that has not come to fruition. And so one of the questions we raise is, well, why would you spend, right, like invest in this massive development when we have Mesa del Sol sitting there and there's dozens of other active subdivisions that, have places where people can live? And the important point also is one of the points of justification for the Santolina Master Plan by the developers is that, there's this need because of population growth, right, to accommodate this population increase. But we bring up what population increase, right? And recently, the Albuquerque Free Press had this great story on the Santolina Master Plan, and they had a statistic in there that said that there was less than 1%. Again, I will repeat it, less than 1% of population growth for our city. So where would this population of over 90,000 people come from?
Well, any of us who've lived in New Mexico for a long time know that the West Mesa, particularly the Southwest Mesa, is geologically unstable. It's a big sand dune, and so I presume that's where Santolina would go.
Yes, and so that's one of the points that we've also raised during the hearings, is that, if you look at the geologic nature of where this development would be built, it includes a significant amount of sand dunes. And these sand dunes are over 10,000 years old. So we're talking about ancient sand dunes that are, the sand underneath is being held in place by a layer of topsoil. And so once you remove that top, layer of the topsoil, what do you unleash? Right? And as it is, those of us who live in the valley and people who live on the west side, they understand the current problem of blowing sand.
Absolutely.
Right? And so if you uncover thousands of acres, right, of the topsoil holding the sand from these sand dunes, we start thinking, well, what will be the consequences, right? And so you can just imagine the problem, the significant problem that would pose not only to the residents there, but the residents also along the west side and especially in the valleys, and the impact that sand will have on especially farmers, for instance, right? So we're looking at a really significant health impact that has not been addressed. We have addressed it, but they have not addressed it, right? And by they, I mean there hasn't been any type of impact assessment done on the behalf of Bernalillo County or the developers to actually really assess what these impacts would entail.
Let's go to another aspect of this. When this idea first appeared, I thought it was kind of the last gasp of a way of urban development at the beginning of a new world of climate change, in which the desert Southwest will lose populations. Well, not huge amounts, I hope, but will be, seriously having to confront the conditions of living in a desert. So you have 90,000 new people, presumably where are they going to come from? I suppose we're going to grow them or something. But what does that imply when it comes to water? We all know that they don't have water. They may have water rights, but they have to get those water rights from somebody. And So let's explore that a little bit if we could.
And you have raised a really important point. And I, what we need to also think about is Santolina, the decision that our 5 county commissioners are being tasked to make regarding the Santolina Master Plan. It's beyond just this master plan. I think it's really symbolic of where our decision makers will choose to lead our county and beyond, right? Which is so important during this time that we're seeing heavy-duty climatic changes, environmental changes. The drought continues. Recently, there was a report out of Cornell that it's not just a drought, it's a mega drought that we're seeing, right, in our area. And so the question that we must think about when we think about the Santolina Master Plan is, where do we want our city and our county to head, right? In what direction? Should we continue to invest our very limited resources in outdated sprawl type developments? Or do we finally learn to become better stewards of the earth and instead use those limited resources in revitalization projects? And that's one of the things that we've been bringing up is the environmental changes we're seeing is demanding that we become better stewards. Yes. And by investing in sprawl type development, we would be going contrary to that. And if we even look at, cities across the nation, they're also moving away. There's this tendency now to move away from sprawl type developments because people are realizing that that's not the best way to deal with current demands.
So we hear that the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority, which is always a hard thing to get out, has promised Santolina development with an enormous amount of water, like maybe 52,000 acre feet a year or something like that. We also hear that the infrastructure to get it all out there would be costing many at least $100 million, and there's already in town, I read something like $350 million worth of upkeep and work that needs to be done. So where's that water going to come from?
That is a very great question, because that's what we've been asking. We have continuously been asking that in every hearing, but there was a very drastic shift in the conversation that took place at the hearings once the Water Utility Authority produced this letter of water availability to the developers. All of a sudden, water was no longer a problem. Or that is how it was being addressed, right? At the hearings as well, we now have this letter that's guaranteeing the water, but yet we still haven't to date seen any type of development agreement that actually includes all the details of where this water would come from. And then again, most importantly, the long-term negative impacts that would have for not the people who depend on water for their livelihood, along the rivers. For example, the farmers, the acequieros, the ranchers, the landowners, not just them, but even beyond, right? Because once we start negatively impacting the health of the river, we understand, those of us who understand, science and environment and ecology, we understand that those impacts will not be contained. They will impact the entire system, right? And so one of the things that we've been trying to raise awareness about is the impact that the Santolina would pose specifically on farmers and acequieros. And that is why we became involved, our organization, which is Center for Social Sustainable Systems, and also South Valley Regional Association of Acequias, we became very involved in Contra Santolina, the group, because we understand the long-term impacts that, this would have on the health of our communities. And the best way to explain this to people who, understanding how water works in New Mexico it's really difficult. It's a very complex issue. And so the best way to explain this to people is that Santolina, what we equate to that is increased pumping, right? Increased pumping of water, underground water. And people will ask, well, why, right? How does that work? And so we get our water primarily from San Juan Chama. And San Juan Chama, we use about 60% of surface water, right, for the residents there, the customers of the Water Utility Authority. So about 60% and 40% comes from pumping of groundwater. And so any type of new development, whether it's Santolina Master Plan or any other new development, is going to require water, right? And so where would they get the water? If the San Juan Chama, everything's allocated, what does that mean? It means that you would have to increase pumping. And when you increase pumping of groundwater, the only way to offset those depletions, right, of the aquifer is to then transfer water rights. Absolutely. And because water rights are completely allocated, there are not any new water rights. If you look at the individuals who actually own those water rights, who are they? They are the farmers, they're the acequieros, whose lives depend on the river. And we've already seen in the past years a significant loss of farmland in the valley. And so if we think about the importance of food, right, the importance in this, there's this the farmers markets are taking off. Yeah, people are really invested. They enjoy that. It's become part of their norm to go to farmers markets to support, that local industry. Yeah. And so if we think about the long-term impacts that this would pose, who would be the front line?
So do you think at this March meeting, the County Commission is actually going to agree to support a pie-in-the-sky operation that, if it gets started and doesn't get completed, creates virtually a death storm on the West Mesa for everybody here in town? I can't imagine, seriously, how 90,000 new people are going to appear when we're already beginning to actually lose population. I don't see how that works. What do you think is going to happen at that commission meeting? I'm not asking you to make predictions because I know you don't have a crystal ball, but you must have a feeling.
I'm really glad that you've asked that question because it's something that we think about every day. And it is my hope and the hope of all the others involved in this working group and many of the community who are also speaking out against the Santolina Master Plan, that the Bernalillo County Commissioners really look at all the information that's been presented and really think about the weight of this decision that they're about to make. And of course, we've heard, the various spectrums that, that they will approve this. And for us, that's such a hard reality that we would have to face, that, 5 commissioners would actually approve something of this nature, and especially with all the research that has been presented. And for me, research is very important. I am a researcher. And I know that, in this doctoral work that I've been engaged in, if my work was full of holes and full of red flags, my committee would send me back. They would not allow me to get to this point. And so I really hope that the Bernalillo County Commissioners think about this and think about the extent of the impacts that this would have, and that they make the best decision for not only our county, we're talking about our city and beyond. This is a major, major decision that they have to make. And so it is our hope that they deny the approval of the Santolina Master Plan for all these issues that we've brought up, and to realize that maybe at some point something such as Santolina Master Plan was appropriate to be built, but at this particular day And this particular time that we're faced with, it is no longer the moment to support the Santolina Master Plan. And so instead we should, instead of disinvesting from our already established communities that are in a state of disrepair right now, we should use those limited resources to invest in our established communities and not invest in a development that will be built in the peripheries of our city. And one of the things that to me just really stands out during the last hearing is we had quite a few young people attend and speak up and voice their opposition to the Santolina Master Plan, because they said, you know, they represent this new millennial generation, and they said they don't want to drive out of the city core, right, to the residents. They want to be able to walk to work. They want to live more, you know, and better conscious with what's happening geologically, environmentally. And so we need to listen to them. We need to listen to this new shift that is taking place in our communities. And the shift is towards, you know, supporting already established communities. That's what we should do. So again, if we could say anything to the county commissioners, it would be for them to really think about this and to really think about the impact that this would have beyond the boundaries of the Santolina Master Plan. This impacts all of us. And so I hope that they make the right decision to deny the Santolina Master Plan.
That's so well said, and I completely agree with you. And I would hope that our viewers and our readers would call their county commissioners and talk and listen, but also tell them how they feel. Thank you so very much for being with us today. It was an excellent interview, I think, and I think you shed a lot of light on this whole very curious and sort of completely retrograde idea. Thanks so much.
And our thanks to you for allowing us this space to voice our concerns, which is very important because many people remain uninformed regarding the Santolina Master Plan because unfortunately mainstream media has not invested the time to inform the public thoroughly. So again, we thank you.